Hi, and welcome to The Fault Line, a CMG consulting podcast exploring the pivotal moments where business strategy meets real-world pressure.
Welcome back to The Fault Line. Kim Scribner here today. Fault Line is where we bring together smart people to discuss interesting topics for business leaders. I'm missing my partner in crime today, Gary Lancina, and that is in recognition of International Women's Month. We've got a variety of smart women we're bringing to our episodes this month to talk to us about important topics for you. And today I've got Julie Bush here with me, and I'll ask her to introduce herself.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Bush. My company is Product Rehab. I am delighted to be here with Kim today. My focus is on growth strategy, and I hope we have a lot of nice things to drop for your followers today.
Thanks, Julie. So we're here today to talk about how we format IDIs or discovery conversations with folks to get to real insights. So we know we can have lots of interesting conversations with people, but our goal is always in those conversations to get to an insight, especially when we're conducting them in a business sense. So I'll ask you maybe to start out with, what is an IDI? Because those of us in the businesses, we use lots of slang and acronyms. And when they're done well, what might that look like?
Yeah, sure. IDI is an in-depth interview, and of course, it is a methodology that we use in marketing research. It's a qualitative methodology. In-depth interview is exactly what it sounds like. We spend 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes 2 hours with an individual, asking them their thoughts, opinions, motivations, etc., regarding the specific question on hand for the client.
How do you know when what's the feeling you get when an IDI is really good? Like when you're ending that conversation, is there a feeling you have about it?
Sure. Well, IDIs are actually very personal, even though most of the IDIs I conduct are in a B2B scenario. But in reality, attitudes, behaviors, motivations are still very personal. And at the end of a really great slam dunk IDI, there is one telltale sign, and that's when the interviewee thanks me for the interview because they feel like they've learned a lot or that they've had a really positive experience sharing their thoughts and feelings with their, proxy, which is me on behalf of the client.
Yeah, people love to be listened to.
Exactly.
So before you actually go into the interviewing process with folks, tell us a little bit about what the design for an IDI looks like. How do you know how to get to the right strategic questions?
hmm Well, obviously, you start with the business decision that needs to be made at the end of this probably multi-phase effort. I think most people listening will understand that qualitative research is kind of what you do in advance of the quantitative research. So as part of the process, you're obviously constantly considering the business decision that needs to be made. So we like to ensure that the client and the client team has had a chance to articulate all of the hypotheses that are before them, things that they, as professionals and experts in their own field, feel that they know, and hypotheses, but also some of the other unanswered questions, identify those unknowns. And once we've sort of come up with that laundry list of hypotheses, we then focus on prioritizing those hypotheses to understand what are those big questions and hypotheses that will actually, in fact, lead to the ability to make that business decision at the end of the effort. And then once you've kind of prioritize those hypotheses, the next step is to figure out what are those specific questions. We call it learning agenda, right? That are going to help us get to the bottom of those hypotheses, to prove or disprove or just kind of flesh out those hypotheses. So we develop a learning agenda, and from that, that's where the questions come from, and then we start the IDI process.
Yeah. I love the label of learning agenda because it really kind of dictates that we are there to learn, right? We have some kind of assumptions that we're doing this work for, and we're trying to prove or disprove those assumptions or hypotheses, as you said. But learning as a word just leans into curiosity. And I think that's what this whole process is about, is a business is curious about what whether it's their members, their customers, their patients, their employees are thinking about a specific topic. So I love that learning agenda label a lot. Um, so when we're talking to people, right, we're dealing with humans and everybody wants to share their opinion about everything. And
Uh-huh.
so how do you kind of get past opinions into a real insight?
Right. That, yes, everyone has their opinions, but really getting past the opinions is almost the easy part of the IDI. Opinions kind of queue up the follow-up questions. So, often, the easy immediate response is, well, what makes you say that? Right? And then once you ask that question, then we start to learn about what are their attitudes toward, the subject matter. What are their beliefs? What are their motivations for purchasing or not purchasing? What are their motivations for that choice? What triggers them to actually go out and make that purchase or make that renewal, for example?
Yeah.
And then
So you're trying
ultimately
to
that.
really get into that like deep kind of reasoning that is in
Mhm.
that individual's
Yeah.
mind.
What is I often like literally verbatim, my comeback usually is, "What is the rationale for that?"
The tell me more kind of statement that normally exists
Mhm.
in whether it's team meetings, but that rationale for help me understand kind of moment. So while you are in the process of interviewing someone, you're having this great conversation with them. How do you test for honesty and know whether or not, like in some cases when we're doing IDIs, I would imagine there might be incentivized. So sometimes we're paying somebody to do an interview. Sometimes they're giving just of their time. How do we get to like real usable detail that we know is their honest feedback?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I think it's in how you set up the IDI from the start. Once you're on the meeting with them. It's extremely important to be an authentic interviewer, to be professional, and personable at the same time. So authenticity, you want to be likable. Uh, it's really important for them to feel comfortable with you. Like I said, most of the interviews I conduct are in the B2B space, so there's a certain level of professionalism that's expected. It is a meeting, and so there is an expected exchange of information. Um, so I think just kind of establishing that from the start is really important. And then number 2 is ensuring that they understand that you are hearing what they're saying. So, for example, I typically will play back, almost verbatim, something that they've said early in the interview, so that they know right away that I am listening to what they're saying. And then they will open up much more quickly because, of course, we have such limited time with them. I think just establishing those very human connections is important to breaking down those kind of potential barriers to honesty. Although I've really never encountered an IDI where I
Hmm.
suspected inauthenticity.
Yeah, I think, and while it's less formal than what you're doing in most of the work that you do, a lot of the work that I do in the transformation space, we're doing discovery interviews with people inside an organization that are around their ways of working. So it's less about are you in, would you be interested in buying this thing? Would you be interested in paying at a certain price point for this thing? And more around what's working and not working in your current organization setup. And what I have always found is because I'm the outsider, and while I kind of represent the company, but in a very different way as a consultant, sometimes people I feel like are more honest with me than they would be if they were directly asked by their leaders or somebody inside their organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I do completely agree that objectivity is really important, because they do feel that, you're an intermediary, and it's a safe space for
Yeah.
them to
Yeah. And
be
that's how we
candid.
set the conversations up, right? Like we said,
Mhm.
this is, somewhat anonymized. We're going to use thematic information from what you've said, but we're not necessarily going to attest it specifically to you. And that gives people
Mhm.
that comfort that you're talking about to be more honest with you. Of course, we can easily burn that if we didn't keep that confidence. So that's an important part of what we do as professionals as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you walk away from a great conversation, and we need to turn those into real insights that a business can actually use.
Uh-huh.
Talk to me about kind of what that process is like for you.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, you were always going back to that business decision, and I'd like to touch base with that a few times during we'll call it fielding process, right? So after the initial few IDIs are complete, it's good to kind of go back and look at those hypotheses and objectives and that business decision. Because, the beauty of the IDIs is that you can adjust the guide as you go, which we do quite often. And so by the time you get to the end, you should be in pretty good shape with being able to really specifically get at developing a framework for ultimately leadership in the client organization, to be able to look at, a report or engage you in a conversation where there is a very specific kind of pathway to what is next to making that decision.
So we're having a conversation with someone, we're trying to understand the value of a membership purchase and what
Mhm.
they perceive the value as. But the interviewee takes you down a path that is completely off that script. How do you does that happen often, and what are your techniques to bring them back?
Mhm. Well, it depends on what they're saying, right? Because part of the qualitative is to turn over every rock that's out there. So, um, if if they're getting sort of quote off topic, but it is relevant, right? Like they're telling us that there's a new attitude or motivation that we haven't considered
Right.
yet, then obviously we need to kind of pursue that. But after, two or three sentences, if we're really veering veering into completely different space, it's pretty easy to wrangle them back with just some kind words and um, pivoting or getting back to the original question.
Yeah.
They'll come back.
I think it's useful that like as you were talking about earlier, you do a couple of the IDIs and then you're going back with the client and saying, "Hey, we might be hearing something else that we want to discover," and you can adjust your interview question set, so to speak, or your learning agenda, because we could find things that maybe the client didn't even think of in our initial setup with them. So
Yeah, that
good to be able
happens
to
all
keep
the
that path.
time. I call that the aha moment.
Uh-huh.
And you were asking at the top of the session about what makes a good IDI. And another telltale sign is when the client has an aha moment. And that's either, live in the chat, you know,
Mhm.
or in one of the debrief sessions where something's come up that just they completely did not consider. And then certainly will continue to pursue that thread through the remaining IDIs. Those are huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like having the agility of the interviewing process and you've got a certain period of time, obviously, of which you're conducting IDIs, but being able to pivot them to those new learnings that were unexpected or aha moments
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
key.
I could write a book about the aha moments, actually. You're giving me some ideas.
All the things Julie discovered that the client did not know.
Yeah.
Yes. What haven't I asked you about that you think is kind of important in this process, maybe to our audience that they might want to know about?
I guess I would reaffirm what many people already know or suspect or have even experienced, if they've had an opportunity to participate in a qualitative study that includes IDIs. But it's such a rich learning opportunity. It really is a privilege to listen to customers talk for 45 minutes or an hour and really listen to their attitudes and motivations. It's really refreshing. And clients just really learn a lot from listening to customers in that environment.
I've used this quote on previous episodes of the podcast, but we were born with two ears and one mouth. And, whenever we're given the opportunity to do more listening, that is a privilege. I love how you phrase that.
Yeah, I have a little kind of rule of thumb where I target 5% of the IDI is the moderator talking. 90 to 95% is the participant talking.
I love that. And now today we've flipped it and we've put you in the interviewee seat and we've made you be the 90% today.
Yes, it's a little awkward.
Well, you're doing great. I've enjoyed listening to you.
Totally outside my comfort zone on this one.
I have a couple of questions that I'd like to give you just as kind of rapid response that are quotes to if you enjoy playing this game with me. So the first one is conducting a good interview is actually about shutting up. So we kind of just talked about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you want me to respond to that?
Yeah.
It's I mean, that's a bit harsh, right? But conceptually, absolutely, it's true. Queue up the question and just let the individual speak. You've done these interviews before too. Some people are a lot more articulate than others. So sometimes you have to give people a little more time to get their full thought out, whereas others can complete it beautifully in one sentence.
Yeah. Before I go to the next rapid response, just a quick story. I often am surprised when I hear people who are supposed to be doing discovery that probably are not quite professionals at it as you are. And they'll ask 3 questions or 4 questions all strung together without pausing for a break. And then it's incredibly difficult for the interviewee to, which one of those things do you want me to answer? And can I even remember all of the things that you've asked me?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, the kind of like what we're doing here, a lot of these IDIs are very conversational. Unlike reading from like a scripted discussion guide, the best insights really come from just sitting and talking with this professional and listening to what's on their mind.
All right. So the next rapid response, stories are where the richest insights lie.
I could see that. I guess that's true. Stories are a wonderful way to express insights. I mean, just culturally, anthropologically, I guess that's
Yeah.
largely how we as human beings can relate to each other. So I would agree with that.
Great. And then our last one is the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said.
Mm. That's interesting. Yes, I do think, I mean, sticking with the subject at hand, right, with the IDIs. I mean, at least now we have, Zoom and everyone's using it. So it is nice to be able to look somebody in the eyes and see their body language, and hear their tone of voice, because we know obviously we communicate with more than just our words. So as the moderator, we watch for those cues, and that's how we know how to kind of steer the line of questioning and just make sure that what's important to me is not interpreting what isn't said, but it's ensuring that they get a chance to say what they're not saying. That's kind of the craft of the moderator.
Yeah, I think that in the work that I do, which is more in the team space than the individual communication space, this is critically important because when you're in a room of 5 or 6 people and you've got the one person who's kind of leaning back, their arms are crossed, or even on a video situation, you can tell they're looking at another screen or down at their phone or something else, is doing exactly what you just said, which is asking a thought-provoking question specifically to that person, maybe to get them to bring those things to light.
Absolutely. And, you just mentioned in the group, I mean, there typically is at least one person in the group scenario who's, maybe being brought along, arms
Yeah.
crossed. But that person is there for a reason, and they actually do have a load of experience and can contribute a lot. So I do make sure that those people are heard as well.
Well, it has been great talking to you today. I really love this topic because I feel like you and I both do this type of work in very different scenarios. And I'm always kind of thinking like, how might Julie handle this? So this was insightful for me. I hope our guests enjoyed our episode today. For those of you who are not yet following us on LinkedIn, please do so. You can find us, cmgconsulting.com is our website as well, and we look forward to joining you for future conversations. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Fault Line.